It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, and all things about how you can have a secure and sexy relationship. Now here's your hosts, Tara and André. Here we are again in two different spots.
Crazy.
I know. I made a last minute trip to my hometown, so I'm here at my parents' place, actually in my childhood bedroom, which is now the office, but they actually haven't ever repainted it. So this is the last color it was. So it's pretty funny being in here.
I wonder what the walls would say if they could talk. What have they seen? What have they seen all those years of your growing up and coming into it?
Yeah, I do feel a nice energy in here. I don't usually sleep in here because this is now the office and there's another bedroom. So I sleep in there. But yeah, now that I'm in here, I'm feeling like, yeah, I think there's a good energy here.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Well, let's jump in. So we're talking about the 5 ways to reignite the fire in your long-term relationship, because I think sometimes, when you've been in a long-term relationship, things can get stale. You do the same old thing. You might need other things to help heighten desire.
I've not been in many long-term relationships. I've been in a lot of short-term relationships, but I've been in a long-term relationship with myself, and our being alone has given me some space to be with myself. But I've been discovering some things about myself, as far as my feelings, as far as my sexual experience, like a whole bunch of different ways. And I'm surprised at just how much I am discovering.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about that a little later on if there's time and you're open to it. Okay, so just to go back, we talked about the first 3 things. So number 1 was having some distance and spending time apart, which is a bit about what you talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So when we spend too much time together, we start maybe even losing our individuality in a sense, right? We start being identified or seeing ourselves as a couple, which is wonderful. But where are we in that we? Like, where are we individually in that we? How we lost sight of ourselves? Can we spend some time still reclaiming ourselves and being there?
Yeah, and I think just like you were talking about, it's so amazing to be able to rediscover parts of yourself. And sometimes you need that alone time. Like we had that exact conversation last week because I had bought that cervix wand, and I had been doing some exploring on my own when I was in Toronto and kind of just getting into it. And then when I came back to Montreal, this is my own belief, so I put this on myself, is that I felt like I didn't have the space to do that exploration on my own because we both work from home, and so we tend to be in the same space a lot.
Right.
So, but we did find ways of creating space within the space we have, which is awesome. So that was number 1. So we want to continue to identify with self and what we love to do as individuals, like see friends, do things, and continue to be an individual, not just a we.
Right. So having our own interest and being able to have time for that and find ways of expressing that. And then number 2 is being present, right? So when we are back together with each other, how can we be present, right? So we're spending time apart, which is important, but when we come back to each other, what could we do to really be present beyond simply being physically present? Can we be emotionally present? Can we be sexually present? What are some of the ways? And, it's interesting on a kind of side note is to see if we can be present with our 5 senses. So,
yes.
Yeah, because sometimes if we had any history of ED issue, we might be in the past thinking about when it didn't work well, or we might be forecasting into the future that it's not going to work well. In both those cases, we are not present. So when we are having mindfulness of those 5 senses of our sight, our vision, being able to use our vision, hearing what's going on, smelling, tasting, touching, these things will automatically bring us back into the moment. And then we're not thinking about all those other things. We're simply being present, and you'll see something incredible happen. You'll just be there and it'll be wonderful. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because I came here at the last minute, it was a lot of rushing around and stuff like that. And you know, when I'm feeling stressed and I can feel a little bit anxious, and I know I wanted to have some intimate time with you. And what, you know, you were good at really reminding me to like breathe and pay attention and feel my skin. And once I started doing that, it like completely transformed the, the, the experience for me. And so
Right.
I want to be more conscious of that because it does make a huge difference for me.
Sure. And, it makes me think about the idea of wanting to go to this almost as as an invitation, as a practice, right? So we don't have to get it perfectly. And if we find ourselves kind of veering off it, we just acknowledge it and then invite ourselves to come back. Or we might invite our partner in a very loving and non-pressuring way, which is simply an invitation to come back and be with us to the best of our ability.
Yeah, so it's a perfect segue to number 3, which it was interrupting patterns and routines. So doing things differently, changing the time of day, doing something. We had an experience last week where we really interrupted our pattern. We actually did a quick live. So if you missed it, there's a little bit of like afterglow live that we posted in the group. I think you were thinking, André, that maybe it was a TMI, but I think the reason we went on was because it was such a great experience to just do something different in the moment. So I was feeling really good and aroused because I had taken care of some of my pleasure. And when you had a break in between appointments, you know, I came to you and said like, hey, and then it really changed because I was already, you know, like elevated and feeling like I wanted more. And we're going to talk a bit about, you know, this whole responsive desire a little bit later. But yeah, it was great. Like that was such an electrifying experience. And that was quite different.
All that feeling of elation from those endorphins being released, we did want to share that. It was, we were on the high from it. So it was completely wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. Okay. So we're finally on to number 4, increasing our sexual and erotic energy. Yeah, but it's important like to think, is your sex life with your long-term partner or yourself, you know, as hot as you wish it could be?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the self part as well, because I think that when we are wanting to be in a couple, we might, I hear from some people that I work with that they might want to look at their partner as though they wish their partner was more this or they wish their partner was more that. And I think that really hit home for me because I was spending some time alone this weekend by myself and looking at my relationship emotionally, sexually, physically with myself, and how do I feel? So if I feel less than fantastic or less than aware or less than connected with myself, how much am I going to be able to connect with you? And it was amazing because at one point I was doing a yoga position and I felt my finger on my ankle as was per the position. And I realized, have I ever touched that area of you with real consciousness? So I had the consciousness within me, and all of a sudden I got excited about the idea of I would like to touch you just below the ankle when I see you, if you'd consent to it.
Ooh, I love that.
It was awareness of making that connection with self and with other, and how we might allow for that awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned to you as well, like we have these like gloves that are kind of textured in the bathroom, and they're meant to be put on and put soap on to scrub yourself. But I think we've gotten to this pattern of just leaving it there. And I think your soap is sitting on it. And I took it out one day and put like, you know, body wash on it and started like putting it on my body. And that the pleasure I got from that like rough sensation was really like, it was really good. I think I came out of the shower and I was like, André, you got to use this thing. But it's like all pleasure and yeah, like you're talking about the senses and like having that connection. And it does, I think it helps having pleasure in your entire day, I think helps everything, right? So,
well, I mean, I think that's wonderful that we use those loofahs or those gloves or whatever it might be in that, and that feeling of touch. But what about the inner connectedness we have, that feeling of touch?
Oh no, you're breaking up, André.
Am I going in and out?
Yes. Okay, I missed some of what you said. Did you want to repeat it, or should we move on?
Well, we were talking about getting in touch with our physical part, but it made me think back to the part of our being in touch with our emotions and our partner's emotions. So are we feeling secure, right? What kind of attachment are we having? Do we feel as though we are being loving or are being loved? Are we comforting? Are we familiar? Are we friends with our partners? How are we with our kids? All of these things will factor into how we are able to relate with each other.
Yeah, and our mind has a lot to do with how we feel sexually and like erotically, you know what I mean? So we'll talk a bit about that in a second too. But I think for like some people, if you do have a secure, loving, familiar relationship and there's affection and you have a good relationship with the kids, it may seem like things are like, as I said, good enough.
Right.
But I mean, those things are amazing. But the other part of that is, as they say, and you know, we've experienced too, is that they can sometimes dim the light on our desires. And, you know, sometimes it can get to a place where, you know, the sex life is feeling a bit ho hum, or you're doing the same things over and over again. I mean, I think we're pretty good at changing it up, but we do once in a while, like any couple, I fall into some patterns, you know, so there's people out there we know that want more and to feel more. So even if you're not feeling desire, there's often, you know, you feel like you want to, but just don't know how to get to it. So.
And you feel that you want to, might not know how to get to it. But then there's also that other feeling, which you had mentioned, was the idea of having the obligatory sex, right? Feeling as though we have to do it out of a sense of duty, or that we're doing it for the other person, which I guess on occasion isn't the worst thing, but it should not be the standard. If we're feeling that too often, well, then there's something there that we might want to take a look at.
I think it creates a dynamic when it feels obligatory and one person feels like they're always asking and the other person's maybe accepting or refusing. It creates this bit of a dance that can cause a tension, but not a good tension in the way that brings about the sexual energy. So,
right, exactly.
You know, there is hope though. And, you know, we can do something about it. And like we were talking about, even, you know, even us, I mean, that sounds stupid to say even us, we have done that we've done that recently to kind of change things up in our own relationship and our intimacy.
Sure have. Do you remember briefly what some of the things were that we did to mix it up?
Well, the other day was definitely different time of the day. Not leaving it till the night is a good thing. Or if you do it at night, it's like do it early in the evening before you sit down to watch Turner Classic Movies. And, you know, you get eating the popcorn, you know what I mean? And you get really cozy and comfy and then you fall asleep. Like,
yeah,
after you've fallen asleep is not the time to want to do it.
Perhaps not, unless you take a little cat nap and then wake up from it.
Exactly. So,
but one of the other things I think that was quite interesting was you had spent a little bit of time alone getting yourself in that area that you wanted to be.
Yeah.
But when I came over to you, you were quite receptive.
Yeah.
Quite inviting.
Yeah, that is definitely a game changer. But I think the point is that you can't just sit and wait for desire to increase. Like you need to take deliberate action. And we're going to talk a bit more about that next week. But let's go into, you know, our number 4 is what can you do to increase your erotic and sexual energy?
Yes.
So before we get into that though, like I think you asked me this the other day, what is eroticism?
It's a term that's thrown around.
Yeah.
You like Esther Perel's definition of it, or what she has to say about it?
Yes.
So she says that
eroticism blooms from the tension between excitation and inhibition and manifests in the things we say and do, by how we act and by how we think. So eroticism is not sex. It's sexuality transformed by the human imagination. So she talks about the thoughts and dreams and anticipation, impulses, all these things that make up what she calls our erotic landscape. She talks about the importance of making eroticism part of your self-care plan, which I think is awesome, which we just kind of talked about. So eroticism as your self-care plan, I think is a great goal.
So how do we do that?
So how do we do that? So I think I've got 5 things here. So first of all, do you know what makes you aroused and increases sexual tension or energy for you?
Good question.
Yeah, so this can start by paying attention to when you feel aroused and what's going on. So the circumstance, so collecting the data, the time of day, the circumstances leading up to the feeling. Like I know for me, like I'm sitting here drinking my smoothie, but when I have my morning workout and have my smoothie and my coffee and have a shower and feel good, I do feel I'm more wanting, because I feel that wanting in my body more than if I was tired, I didn't exercise, ate shitty, that sort of thing.
So for me, when I hear your list of things like that, I'm hearing all indicators of self-love, self-care,
Hmm.
taking
Yeah,
time
for
for self.
me.
Mhm.
Yeah. How about for you?
I'm pretty much always on. So, there's, I guess the things, so I go from the position of pretty much always being on, and it's one of the things that make me feel less sexy. So having stressful things, feeling as though there's things I have to do for
Mm.
work, or, just the day-to-day kind of mundane things that might enter into the bedroom with me or to the erotic arena. So can I either do them and feel free of them, or can I compartmentalize them and leave them at the door before I come in?
Hmm. Yeah.
But I might also benefit from more. So if I were to allow myself to take a bath, I might feel better. Am I cutting in and out again?
Yeah.
Désolé.
Désolé. Well,
Désolé.
I like what Esther, like there was a really great article I read, and she says, like, thinking about when to your point, I turn myself off when, or I'm turned off when, and then I turn myself on when, and knowing what those things are. And I think I wanted to make this point as well, and this ties into also what we were saying earlier, is I think for many people, and I'd say it's common for people, I think, that identify as women, not always, but definitely a lot of women, especially as we age, that we don't just, you said you get on, you're on all the time, but I don't feel that way myself.
Right.
It's more about responsive desire. So I know this, we've shared this diagram before when we talked about desire, but I really like it because it talks about where you start with sexual neutrality, which is just off to the right there. And then you move in this circle. So there's sexual stimuli, sexual arousal, increased desire and arousal. I can't read it because my screen is small.
Emotional and physical satisfaction
And
and
then,
emotional intimacy.
yeah, so it's this cycle, and you may have to go a couple cycles, but it's true. Like, this neutrality is often where I think people start. And I know that's where I start often. So when we had that situation last week where I took care of some of my own pleasure first, it really changed our interaction after the fact. So doing that again.
So you're taking care of yourself first was one way of being able to kind of be proactive and jumpstart it, right? So you might not necessarily felt it going into it, and it started to activate other areas.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is, and we do this as well, is like taking things slow, like warming up, right? Not having a destination in mind and starting with exploring the senses and stuff like that. These are some ways of doing it.
It's amazing because we don't necessarily have to just have the physical part or be very quick to go to it. But as I was speaking earlier about the idea of having touched my own ankle and then fantasizing, thinking about touching your ankle, it got me very alerted. I was very excited about the idea of it. I had already gone into the fantasy of it, and I was employing these different things. So it was wonderful. So yeah, it doesn't have to be PIV. It doesn't have to be orgasm central, any of those things. They come or they don't come. That's wonderful. But it was simply the idea of being next to you that I found to be exciting.
I wanted to make a point though, because that ties into this as well, is one of my clients was talking to me about the fact that their husband travels a lot and they were just about to come back and they were excited, but also had this sort of not fear, but like nervousness because the expectation that there was going to be sex or some sort of sexual activity felt very high for them. And what she had noticed in their relationship is that he only touches her when he wants sex. And so for her, the touch the like patting her back or kissing her on the cheek, like when just passing by, is associated with having to have sex, like all the way through sex, like not just pleasure. So one of the things that we talked about and that she said she's trying to work on is how they might interrupt that pattern and have touch at different times where there's not that expectation.
Right. That's a great point. I'm wondering how she might touch him as well, and what expectations he might have. Is she reluctant to touch him? Does she show him how she wants to be touched? Are there invitations? Are they able to speak about it?
As you know, things like this always come up at the very end of the session when you have to end, like classic.
Yes.
And so it was like, okay, we have to talk about this more.
Mhm.
So I didn't get into that, but I suspect she would be hesitant to touch them because then their expectation was there was going to lead to sex. So it creates this really strange dynamic. And I think that also happens a lot to people in long-term relationships. It's like, if someone starts touching someone more intimately, it means that this is the thing that's happening, you know, which can be good, but it also can be, if that's the only time it's happening, then it can be work in the opposite direction. Yeah.
That's a very good point. It's something to keep in mind. I'm kind of reviewing my interactions with you and how many times I might have touched you without having expectation. And did you imagine that I did have expectation, or vice versa?
I think you're pretty good in the touching department. I don't always feel, but I think in certain circumstances, I might feel it more like, oh, this means that. And then if I'm not feeling up to it, then I'm sort of like, oh, and then you feel bad. And then you're like, oh, I have to say no, even long before I even know if that's your intention or what you want to do. It's just like we create this whole like dialogue in our head. And yeah, it's
What's the antidote to that? Well, how or why should we want to counter that? So we have this idea, and sometimes it might be prudent. We might be actually going towards that, and other times we might have this own inner dialogue where it's really not there. How can we gain clarity? What might we do to find out where our message is going, or if it's wanting to be received?
Yeah, I mean, definitely talking about it always, communication, but also having situations like this is what I might suggest to my client is where there's touch without expectation and having the evidence of that. So you touch me many times, kiss me, you're affectionate, like all kinds of times and in all different places when, you know, and I've come to learn that there's not an expectation associated with that because I have enough evidence that says that when you do this, it doesn't necessarily mean this, but I also feel open to asking you as well.
Right. So. I just had the fantasy of my just passing you and touching you in a very casual way, and you're asking me what my intention might be. That in itself might be kind of sexy, or might be flirting, but we'll talk about that.
Ooh, I like that. Okay. So number 2, so we just talked about knowing what it is that arouses you and what gets you excited when you're turned on. Are there fantasies you have that you wish to fulfill?
You know, Tara, it's so amazing that we're talking about the fantasy because, again, going back to that yoga position yesterday, I was doing the pyramid and I touched my ankle and I thought, you know, it's not real. It's not often an area of my own body that I touch, but then I fantasized about touching yours. I was thinking about those inner dialogues, right? That I create these fantasies. So are they negating my possibility, or am I creating fantasies that will allow for these wonderful different expressions? And am I able to share them?
Yeah, I think they're all good. I mean, there's different kinds of fantasies, right? There's fantasies that just remain in your head that help you in your arousal state. You're like, you know, you may not want to do, I don't know, I can't think of an idea. You know, have random sex with a stranger in a parking lot in between, you know, cars, but the idea of it might be pretty arousing.
Right.
You know,
so some fantasies should remain as fantasies.
They can, and or you can live them out in a way that's consensual and that sort of thing too, right? There's fantasies you do want to live out. And sometimes, I mean, I wrote in the notes like discovering your shadow self, because sometimes the fantasies and desires, there's part of us, it's buried deep in us, and that we may not even be aware we're there. So sometimes people who start to explore kink and BDSM, it's, they consider that their shadow self, the things that they may have denied. It's not necessarily always kink and BDSM, but there might be parts of us that we've denied that need to come out. And if we can discover what those are, then we can find other pathways to eroticism and pleasure, I believe.
So interesting, this shadow self. It makes me think a little bit about alter egos.
Yeah.
How we might go into fantasy or create a different reality, in a sense, but less accessible, things that we might have some kind of prohibition. If I become that alter ego, I think the easiest way for me to demonstrate is by putting on clothing or putting on a wig or something, some type of different area of demonstration. Then it can allow me to fulfill those fantasies that might have in some way been embarrassing or prohibited, or whatever inhibitions might have followed it. So it might be an interesting way of fulfilling some of those fantasies as well.
And do you have an alter ego, Andre?
Are you referring to my sparkle kitten? Yes, I actually do have one, and they are in the closet waiting to get out.
That's awesome. Okay, number 3, can you introduce more spontaneity and surprise in your daily life as a way to increase the energy?
Wow, that's a wonderful consideration. What would be the suggestion, or what might be something that somebody would have done that would be indicating that?
I mean, it's like you might be doing an everyday thing. Like the picture that I chose for today's promo, we were having a spontaneous moment on the couch. Like, I think we were still in our pajamas, and we were just sitting there, and you were just kind of like, we were playing a bit of footsies under robes, and then one thing led to another, and you're open to it. Like, we could have easily said, oh no, we're busy, this is our time that we do this, but allowing for that thing as well. So that's an example. Do you have an example?
I have to give some thought, but the idea of the spontaneity, I think really, I think it's an excellent example, because we were with one agenda, one idea that we were doing something. So, we wanted to be task oriented, but at the same time, we were open to it. And we're like, hey, let's do this. It makes me think about not long ago, also, we got invited to go down to a birthday party, and it was at the end of the date, and it seemed like it was too late. And I would have been very satisfied saying, no, you know what, we'll just send our hellos and whatever. And luckily you said, well, let's go for it. And it was very spontaneous, and we went and we had a wonderful time. So kind of reminding ourselves to be open to it. So I spent a little quality time by myself the other day. I was going to go at it in a rather routine way, but I caught myself. I had a sense of awareness about it and said, well, what other way could you go at it? Could you do something that was different? And indeed, it was very different. And, I'm getting on in years, so I'm surprised that I'm able to find that I'm discovering new things about myself that I thought I was very well versed in. If you had asked me 4 or 5 years ago, did I know myself in this way? I would have thought, yes, very much. And yet I'm coming to find out that there's more and more to discover. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah, and you were very elated when we had our little video date with another friend of ours. After right. you were still on the vibrating stage. So so that was a bit spontaneous to try something new. So you can try things new at home. So
interesting you say vibrating. So a little side thing here is, I have vulva envy, right? I mean, because I think it's wonderful to have that anatomically. There's always considerations that come with it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's wonderful. But then even just all of the toys or equipment or other things that you're able to utilize, it's quite fantastic. And on the other side, for men, I found the experience as far as devices or toys to be rather limited, and some of them seem almost pathetic. It's a bit sad. But there were 1 or 2 other things that I found laying around the house that were quite interesting, that could be utilized, and it just opened up a whole different experience. So uh, I was marveling at it, but I was also beaming because I thought, wow, here I am finding that at my advanced age of 57 years old, I'm finding new ways of experiencing my own sexuality. So
Yeah.
it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then number 4 on the opposite side, I guess, of doing things spontaneous, a way of increasing energy and excitement and some of that tension is maybe having something fun to look for, something exciting to look forward to.
Yes.
So, and maybe it's something that you haven't done before. So, having something excited to get that's in the future can increase the erotic energy in the present. So, the example I use is perhaps you're going to your very first sex club, or maybe you've been before, but you're planning to go again to a sex club or a party. So, talking about who you're going to meet, what you're going to wear, what you're going to try and
Mhm.
experience, or even this can even be something in fantasy. You can create a whole sexual fantasy around something that's looking that you might look forward to, or that might happen, or you could actually be doing it, sort of thing.
Yeah. Very fun. I thought you were going to mention the idea of going to a sex club for the first time as something that we are also doing, right? We are putting together a workshop for people who've
Yes.
never been to a sex club. It's going to
Yeah.
be quite exciting, a VIP treatment, and it's going to be kind of like open relating and sex clubbing 101.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
super excited. That's another thing we have planned. Not sure when that's going to happen, so we'll let people know. But
Mhm.
we want to, yeah, have a VIP night at a sex club that we love
Mhm.
in Montreal. We've been in talks with them, and so we will let you know as soon as possible. But yeah, that's gonna be a fun event.
And I think it's such a great venue for this club in particular because,
Mhm.
especially if you're not that familiar with it, it's a great way of kind of being introduced to it because it's not just come in the door and all of a sudden, bam, you're into an orgy of 500 people. This is a well done club where they actually have very delicious food. They have a dinner area. You kind of become acclimated to the area. People are dressed, but they are mingling. And then there's literally another level where different things happen, where you might have dessert in a sense, right? But it's a beautiful transition that it kind of takes away that big scary thing of what's behind that green door. We kind of go into this in a very seductive, inviting, no expectation kind of way.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And they often have like some sort of sexy entertainment happening too. So yeah, you get acclimated to the space before you ever, enter the play area. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there's a bit of that warm up, and even that increases the sexual energy because you're seeing people, you could talk to them, that sort of thing. So we're very
Yeah,
excited to be planning that. So
they have live music there. And the last time we were there, friends of ours were actually doing a performance piece. It was an erotic circus and
yeah.
beautiful bodies, beautiful things. So yeah, it becomes very enticing, right? It's very sexy to see that and be part of it. And it's just, it's really well done. It's got like a very, makes me think of like what I would see as certain nightclubs from the 50s where people would dress a certain way and there was a certain elegance to it. So it's quite lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different than some of the other clubs. I think the level of dress and how people put themselves together is a little different. And yeah, it's super fun. Anyways, so that's a good segue into trying something new and maybe a bit scary sometimes.
Mhm. Well, moving outside of our comfort zone, right?
Yes.
Moving,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's fun, and we grow through those experiences, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they
we
say
might.
what do they say is like beyond your fear is your greatest growth. You know what I mean? And I totally believe that. Everything I've done where I've stepped out of my comfort zone, both in my professional life and in my relationships and sexual activities, I've grown so much and I've experienced such great things. And so, I mean, it's awesome to say that, I think, but sometimes trying something new, it can be a bit is easier said than done, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I wonder what makes that difficult. So for me, so there's all of my estimations of the unknown, and well, what happens if this happens, or if that doesn't happen, or all these things. And now I'm way beyond that, and I'm into the future of self-doubt or doubting or fear or unknown, all these things. And none of those things really feel that sexy. Whereas if I can just bring it back with that expectation and just see if I'm able to be present, just simply present, it would change that. It makes me think, you referred to one of the trying a different sexual position. And there was one that we tried not too long ago that if I would have seen the diagram, I would have thought, well, this is going to be rather difficult. I'm not sure we'll be able to do it. And yet we went to it and it seemed to work quite well. So,
Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, like, I think, you can totally like Google like best sex positions and watch a few videos, and that definitely works and stuff like that. But I think the thing is, sometimes transitioning from information into action is where, like you said, it's a little bit more difficult, especially if you've been doing the same things over and over again. And I think sometimes when there is a need to do something differently, or there's sort of a decreased desire or a decrease in activity, or it feels like something is not, you'd like to elevate it differently, I think we then really get into our heads and we take sex like super seriously. And then we're like, okay, we have to do this thing. And we kind of lose a bit of the playfulness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
it's supposed to be fun.
It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun.
But
Tara, I get it. I've been there. I've been there.
Sure. But you mentioned the idea of Googling the best sex positions. I was thinking about, what about the worst sex positions? And could we go to them and make them any better? Could we do them with a lot of fun without that expectation we have to do the best? So could we incorporate, could we remind ourselves to just go at it in a light, loving way, that we do have some fun with it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which is, where we come in and we can help you with this. If, being playful and that feels like it's like over here and you're kind of over here, I know that I was with someone for a while and we were having some issues, sexual issues. And it's really can be hard to get over that hump sometimes. So introducing playfulness is awesome in concept, and probably many of you can do it, but it's also where we can help. If you are interested, definitely drop us a DM or book a call with us. So awesome, Andre.
Sorry about the connection issues.
What's that?
I said I apologize again for the connection issues, but I'm glad that we were able to make it through.
Great. I feel like I was too close today. I kept wanting to be backwards so we were even in size, but anyways, I kept moving forward to read.
Come closer. I always want you closer.
Oh. That's to you and to everyone out there. So thanks everyone for joining us. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how to increase energy as well. And bye, Andre.
Bye, man.
If you want to explore polyamory, open up a relationship, or try your hand at swinging, we can help. Check out our website at taranandre.com for information on our Poly Newbies digital course or our deeper dive open relationship and polyamory mastery program, where you get direct coaching from us. There's also other individual and couples coaching options there as well. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks, and have a fantastic and sexy day.